Welcome to the AI Corner. I'm Mike Bailey, here to spotlight the people shaping New Zealand's AI future and drive AI adoption across the country. In today's episode, we're speaking with Joe Sutheran. Joe has been driving performance marketing at Fine Tours Group and building out his AI expertise through projects at work. More recently, Joe's been helping businesses in travel and tourism to adopt AI. Welcome to the pod, Joe.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Do you mind giving us a short version of your story and how it pertains to AI, where you've come from, what you're focused on at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from the UK. I've lived in New Zealand for around about 11 years. 9 of those years I've spent working across different marketing roles, mostly in the travel industry. I started as a content writer, like a marketing coordinator role, and have gradually moved towards more data analysis sort of roles. So my role right now for Fine Tours Group is sort of performance marketing analysis. So I work with an agency to audit how and where we spend our budget at different times of year. I realized probably 6 or 8 months ago that AI was coming for data analysis, right? It feels to me like low-hanging fruit to an extent. It's one of those things it's going to be able to do soon. And I'm finding that it can do it really well now if you're using the right tools. So with that in mind, I sort of took the deliberate decision to upskill and figure out how can I use these tools in order to make myself more defensible rather than easily replaceable. So in the last sort of 6 months, I started to dabble on my own and was always conscious that you don't know what you don't know, and signed up for a couple of courses online. And that's sort of taking my learning and the trajectory of my upskilling in a direction that frankly I didn't expect. I've enjoyed it so much and I'm still enjoying it. And it is leading to a sort of a complete shift in career direction for me. And I'm super excited about it.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing and appreciate, as you say, being more defensible. That's your future-proofing your career at the end of the day. Do you want us to tell us a bit more about the course and what it entails and how it changed your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So it's 2 courses that sort of split in half, or maybe split into 1/3, 2/3. And the first half of the course, you learn what I realize now are the foundations or the fundamentals of one, prompt engineering, which is a phrase that's come up that people either like or they don't like. But it's also tools that you can use usually via the API of these models to make them far more effective and more efficient and more direct and deliberate for the tasks that you want to achieve. So, for example, I wasn't aware of the fact that you could adjust system instructions or you can adjust temperature, and those things have a really significant impact on the performance of the tools that you end up using with those adjustments. So that's the first part of the course, is understanding the new capabilities that you unlock once you're able to make those adjustments. And then the second half is the training wheels are off. It's building a project that it's a multi-step workflow, and in this instance, it's a document generation project. So the input at one end is information from a customer or a potential customer about their particular circumstances, and the output at the other end is a strategy document for building their business. And the use case that they use is, I think it's a market garden business. So they sell greenhouses and they sell those in North America, and the climates across North America are totally different. So it takes in information from people all over the country, and it creates a really specific and really targeted market garden development strategy for that person based on where they are and what they say they want out of the project, whether that's a business that pays them full time and has 10 employees, or if it's just something they do at the weekend.
That's epic. And it sounds as though, all of those inputs are broadly available or principles that are required across most businesses, right? It's not as if that's just use case specific, with some caveats there, but you're kind of building the framework for how AI and automation can work across any business. So how did that lead you into the travel and tourism space or work that you're doing with customers at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I think it's changed the lens that I apply to the work that I already do. So I'm And now every time I approach a task or every time I sit at my computer, I think, right, what am I going to achieve and how can the AI tools that I've already got help me get there? And if I haven't got the tool that I need, how quickly can I build it? Um, so, I mean, one example of that in our team, and this could have gone down like a lead balloon, but it went down really well, is we, the business owns lots of brands and we produce content across all of those brands. And that's a lot of work, right? And SEO is an art in itself, and it's also struggling in the face of generative search, for example. So it's becoming more and more important to make sure you can still squeeze some juice out of that. So we've got lots of brands, and we have someone in the team that writes the content, but he can't write content at the speed that we need for all the brands that we've got. So I helped him, and I spoke to him first to make sure he was comfortable with the solution I was going to pitch, because potentially, in a sense, it could have replaced him, but
Mm.
only sort of one fifth. It could only have, well, it might have replaced half of his role, and obviously there's critical thinking involved in what he does and why we write certain things at certain times of year. There's seasonality aspects to the business. Um, so I designed it so that it could augment what he does, not replace what he does. And it's a case of putting an input into, in this case, a spreadsheet and pressing a run button that runs a workflow that uses really specific agents with brand voice capability and really strong content writing skills to write content for the business that is then returned to the content writing guy to read over, humanize as much as he wants, make sure there's nothing obviously AI about it. And when you build these tools well and carefully, it
Mm.
is indistinguishable. It's completely indistinguishable. Um, so that's one tool that I've built in work time for a specific work solution that I now realize has utility to almost any business that does any kind of content marketing, right?
Absolutely. And you touched on two key points, which I try and talk to others about is firstly, you've got to have the mindset. Like, what am I trying to do here? Like, it's less about what does AI do? It's about what's the business problem I'm trying to solve? And then even that curiosity to say, okay, well, AI doesn't solve the problem as the tools I have today. What can I go and build with AI to accelerate that process, right? And again, that idea of human augmentation, trying to keep the human in the loop as much as possible, not looking to replace people. There's a company called Holiday Extras in the UK who I used to speak with their chief AI officer, and that was one of their core policies within the business is that we're not here to replace humans. If we are going to replace some aspects of their job, we need to retrain them and make them more valuable in other areas of the business, which I'm sure you're seeing internally at your own organization and other organizations you're consulting with as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it might be controversial or people might not have sort of figured it out yet, but
Mm.
you can be people first and have a deliberate AI forward strategy. You can I I think the strongest or most important way to approach it is understand the strengths of the people first. Identify the strengths, identify strengths more generally that AI is unlikely to touch or can't touch right now, and then understand what's stopping those people from using those strengths in the business and solve those with AI. And then watch the speed of the business growth and development because you've unleashed those people and taken some of that work away from them.
Yeah,
That's how
absolutely.
I try to think.
I think you're exactly right. And there's, always there's some aspects of the role or the task that the human will need to be in the loop. Then there are some that are completely automated without the human, or there are some tasks that still require the human in its entirety. So starting to bucket the activities of a task or an outcome into those three areas is a good place to start for businesses. You've mentioned some pretty exciting or clever tools you've built internally, but I also saw, I think it was through LinkedIn, helping people to keep on top of their favorite YouTube channel release. Tell us how you built that. Was that off the back of the course you did and the skills you learned there, or how'd that come about?
Um, no, not specifically off the back of the course. It was a problem that I identified for myself in my own life, and I tried to solve it with the tools and the knowledge that I've gained through the course for sure. Um, so I've built that solution in a platform called N8N. Some people might be familiar with it. Some probably won't be. It's similar to Zapier, but it's kind of unhinged or training wheels are off version of Zapier. It has a bit more capability. Um, and what the tool does is it checks my favorite YouTube channels every 48 hours for new videos, grabs the URLs of those videos, and then will loop through each URL to get the transcript from the video and the video title and the channel title, stuff like that. It saves the transcript and the metadata into a database that I can reference whenever I want. And then it passes the transcript through a transcript summariser AI agent. So it writes a really detailed summary of what the episode was about. It uses Perplexity search tools to go and look stuff up that gets mentioned in the transcript. Like if they talk about a book or they talk about another YouTube channel, it'll go and do a search of that thing and pull back a useful URL that it can save in the summary. And then the summary gets saved to the same record in the database. And it also gets dumped into an email and sent to me every 48 hours. So every 48 hours, I get an email with summaries of new episodes from channels that I like to keep an eye on without having to go and spend 12 hours watching 6 2-hour videos. So it works great.
That's wicked. You've almost got a couple of products there which you could start to spin off and productize yourself, right?
Yeah, potentially. I think, and this takes us possibly down a different route, but the one of the challenges of tools like that is how do you interface with them? If you're not the person who built them, it's quite difficult to interface with that tool because it's a fairly technical tool. And whilst I could integrate it with Slack so that like I could trigger it via a Slack message or something like that, it's not a really clean and resellable, really easily sort of mass-produced solution, right? Because everyone has different channels that they want to watch. That's one part of it, but also everyone uses different tools. So if I integrate it with Slack, then I talk to somebody who is in the Microsoft environment and they use Teams, then suddenly something that sounds really easy to package and sell is actually quite a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's the beauty with AI, right? Is we can now build individualized software or personalized software through, vibe coding or stitching together different tools, which is super exciting. I suppose zooming out, and you've worked in this space for a while now, and when you look at New Zealand businesses, what do you see as holding us back from making better use of AI?
Um, I think I think we're a nation of doers. People are DIY, right? Look how busy my antenna is every weekend. And that stands us in good stead. People are happy to just plunge into it and try and create stuff, which is awesome. But I think more curiosity about the breadth of the field and this and be aware that we don't know what we don't know. I'm learning new stuff every day, and I'm also guilty sometimes of assuming that I already know everything that I need to know to build a solution. And then somebody will tell me something and I'll realize I should have done it that way all along. And that was a waste of 20 hours of trying to vibe code something, right? Um, so more openness to learning, I think. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's something I think about quite a lot where when you pick up something new or you move into a new field, you go through this process with there's a big peak at the start of the graph, and that's what they call Mount Stupid. And then there's a big drop into the Valley of Despair. And then from the Valley of Despair, there's nowhere else to go other than a gradual, slow incline towards the top right of the graph. And that's where mastery is up there. So I picture it like a lot of us, and myself included, we spent a lot of time hanging out near the peak of Mount Stupid. And then the more you learn, eventually you're plunged into the Valley of Despair. And then you start to realize, okay, I don't know all this stuff. There's so much more to learn. And then you start the slow, gradual trudge towards mastery. So I think being aware of that sort of cognitive bias that we don't know everything yet. We might be near the peak of Mount Stupid, and we've got to get to that valley and then start the hard yards, I guess.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that's where it becomes exciting. And all of a sudden, your hours outside of work get consumed because you're tinkering online. But yeah, super fun place to play, and I totally agree. Having that honest conversation with yourself around where am I at and where do I need to develop is almost the first step. but having that curiosity mindset is so important. And do you think there are any sort of specific cultural or societal nuances in NZ that you believe will significantly influence user acceptance or ethical considerations around AI deployment in the country?
Yeah, interesting question. I think what I said before about us being a nation of doers, that's definitely gonna help. Um, I have less experience of how it's happening throughout the rest of the country, but what I find in Wanaka, and it's funny, and it's only a small place, right? But it's probably the most outdoorsy community in the country. And when you start talking about AI with people around here, most of them simply don't care, or they're not. It hasn't got their attention. Their attention is on what they're going to do this weekend, where are they riding their mountain bike, or um, how long am I paddling on the lake for? So I found that a little bit of a challenge. Like I'm an outdoorsy guy myself. I've done a lot of triathlon in my time, but over the last 6 or 8 months, I've parked that because this has got my full attention. And as a result of that, I find the conversations difficult to have. And that's just a me thing, right? That's a challenge for me. I've got to find a way to I've got to find their language and have a conversation in a way that they want to talk about it. So I don't know whether that's an answer to the question. It's just an interesting observation about the community that I'm in and what their priorities are versus what I've realized mine are right now.
Honestly, it might feel like you're in a bubble in terms of Central Otago isn't progressing or it's not on the radar of a lot of people, but you'd be surprised that even up in Auckland, it's the same concept. I feel like I'm in a bubble at work sometimes talking about it, and then you get into the community and others are just getting started, which, as you say, is exciting. And yeah, your weekends get consumed and sports go out the window as a result. But as you say, future-proofing your career is pretty important at the same time. I suppose what do you think of the trends and shifts in AI? Like, what do you think New Zealand businesses aren't ready for, or what should they be getting ready for when we think about AI adoption and rolling it out across workflows, etc.?
Yeah, I think partly obviously it depends on the size of your business as to the size of the challenge that you've got. Um, One thing I see a lot of, and it's the same in almost every business, is data hygiene can be a challenge and silos of data can be a challenge. Um, if people don't know what I mean by data hygiene, I just mean do you trust your source of truth? Do you have more than one source of truth? How many different places from a silos perspective, how many different places do you turn to find out exactly what's going on in your business? And the more joined up that is, and you're likely to be quite well joined up if you're using tools like Salesforce or HubSpot or sort of all-in-one platforms. Um, if your data is really good and hygienic, then deploying AI into it or giving it to AI is far easier, and it's also far more reliable in terms of what comes out the other end. If you've got lots of different places that you turn to, that suddenly becomes quite a challenge. Um, another another trend that I see coming is voice. I think the rise of voice agents is it's coming fast, and those things when you talk to them and they're built well, you almost can't tell the difference. In fact, I would argue that you can't tell the difference already. You can already get you can get a Kiwi in 11 Labs, for example, that talks just like any old Kiwi you would bump into down the street, or you could record yourself for half an hour and then clone your own voice, and then you can talk to yourself. It's that stuff is coming fast, and voice agents are going to be a thing.
And those voice patterns are just getting better and better. I was listening to AI for Humans, the podcast this morning, and they'd basically taken Joe Biden's voice and then placed a female voice over top of it with all of the same speech tones and patterns. And it was scary the way that she sounded. She spoke exactly like Joe Biden, but a female voice. It was incredible. They're just getting
That sounds that sounds entertaining.
yeah, it's kind of freaky at the same time for sure. I agree that the data hygiene is so important. And I sometimes think about AI in two buckets, right? You've got applied AI and then industrial AI. And applied AI is using frontier models, your ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera, and how do I rewrite my emails better and do all the basics. Industrial AI is all around machine learning and how do we actually chew up or crunch the data to make sense of it. And that second bucket is so important where you have that core data model and all your data is plugging into the same place. It's been harmonized or standardized to make sure the AI can actually make sense of it. at the same time, there are so many data sources out there where unstructured data can almost be an advantage. If you've got information coming from transcriptions and calls, but it's coming from your emails as well, or other tools and platforms, your G Suite, your Office, whatever it is, the ability for AI to make sense of that is just phenomenal. So it almost depends on the use case that the business is going after, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And one tip that I've discovered for myself recently that I would give everyone is in custom GPTs, if people are familiar with those, there's some data analysis GPTs. And what I've found really helpful is if you have effectively a flat data set, like a CSV where there's nothing nested inside one another, you can just grab, like, literally copy the cells out of Excel and drop it into a custom GPT, and the prompt is something like, before we get started on this data analysis, I want you to rebuild this table for me. Show me what you think it looks like so I can compare it to the original and make sure that you're understanding the data correctly. And then we'll start unpacking what's in there and talking about patterns or whatever. And the custom GPT it'll run Python in the thread, which is, you don't have to understand it. But what I find really encouraging about that is Python, it's not an AI thing, it's a human design thing. Python's a language that's been written by humans. The AI finds it useful. It provides the prompts that it needs to use for the Python function. It's effectively writing the Python. And then what it returns is if you're lucky, it returns exactly the data set that you gave it. And now you're looking at the same data in ChatGPT as you've got on the other screen. And you can go, okay, right now I've got the confidence that it understands what it's looking at. Now start asking it to unpack what's in there. And you can be a lot more confident that it understands it than if you don't do that first. So that's working really well for me. I'd encourage people to give it a try if they're trying to do data analysis.
That's an epic use case. I'd never thought of that or even experimented with it because I've been trying to use Gemini and G Sheets at the moment, and it still lacks in terms of its ability to really comprehend what I'm doing. So, as you say, if you can do that analysis within the AI tool, whichever one you're using, super valuable. And I got picked this up from Shay. He's a guy who works in New Zealand. Around you can add and call in different custom GPTs into the conversation. That's been game changing as well. Just having a different voice or perspective, bringing in different styles to the analysis is just phenomenal. Super helpful. I suppose, what advice do you often give, but rarely hear in public? Like, what are you telling people that you think is almost uncommon or contrary to the standard opinion around the space?
Yeah, sure. And this might be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Go for it.
Data security is less of a concern than people like to think or obsess over, right? And what I would encourage people to do before they try what I just suggested with dropping a CSV into ChatGPT is make sure in settings you've told it to not train the model for everyone. Turn that off so that it doesn't train the model for everyone. And then the conversation that you're having runs absolutely zero risk of ever being seen by human eyes. But even if that's turned on, I can't remember what the odds are. It's something like 1 in 10,000 conversations get reviewed by a human. So if you fall into the other bucket, you don't have to worry about it. And if you're the 1 in 10,000 that gets reviewed by a human, it's still only going to be a problem if they understand your business, they understand the data that they're looking at, and they have the means and the motive to do something malicious with it, right? So I often challenge people's perspective on that and ask them to make sure that they're not using that as an excuse to avoid something that they're scared of.
I,
So
that's brilliant. I'd never thought of it that way in terms of probability of who's actually going to see it. What is the impact of the model? I tend to agree. It's a drop in the ocean, so to speak, of the data point that's being shared. Worst case, sanitize the data before you put it in there. That's another way to go through it. But I'd never thought about actually telling the model just exclude what the training process is and don't put the data into it. So I'll take that on
yeah,
board.
the other point I would make is think about all the other places online where your data already exists where it's at risk.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
that is like, maybe that's not a reason to just blindly go for it, but it is something to think about, right? My data exists all over the place online, and I'm putting trust in those businesses to look after it. And I don't really see this as any different.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, tread with caution, but there's a smarter way to do it then. And the cost benefit analysis, right? The benefit you'll see from being able to use that data, sanitize it, do whatever people feel is the right way to go, is going to far, hopefully, outweigh the cost of you inputting that information into the AI. I suppose, where do you typically encourage people who are new to AI to get started? What's the first step that you put them forward to?
Yeah, I've a few different suggestions or different recommendations, different tools that I use. You mentioned Gemini, and Gemini within Workspace is powerful and useful if people are in the Google environment. Um, Claude, if people aren't familiar with Claude, is also really useful. Claude is it's similar. The interface looks very similar to ChatGPT, for example, and ChatGPT and AI are kind of synonymous now. But Claude, they have Anthropic have built the Claude models, and they're good at different things. They're very strong in creative tasks and creative writing, for example. So I'd encourage people to explore the different models and see if you can start to figure out what is good for different things. Um, I would also encourage people to buy a buy a paid license for one of those. ChatGPT at the moment, ChatGPT still wins for me. I've got Typing Mind, which is a different thing people can explore if they want, but ChatGPT is still a place I go back to probably more than everything else. Um, so buy a license, use a custom GPT, or create a project in Claude or a gem in Gemini. They're all quite similar. Um, and see the power of using something that's designed specifically for the task that you're trying to do. I think a lot of us turn to ChatGPT as a generalist solution, and they think it can solve every problem. And when you ask a generalist for an answer, you get a generalist's answer. Whereas if you ask a specialist to answer the question, you get a really specialist, really specific, really useful answer. And the more people use that, the more they start to see the power of the tools. If you turn to the generalist and you get a crap answer, suddenly you think, this AI thing, I'm not really bothered about it. It doesn't really work for me. Um, so find a specific tool, use it for a specific use case, and see how much better it is than the generalist. Even have them on two different screens and compare the answers and go, yeah, okay, I'm going to go over there.
Really, that testing and learning, and even getting the models to edit each other's work or to grade it is super helpful. I totally agree. I think the lowest hanging fruit is actually paying for the tool. It's 40 Kiwi, I think it is, $40 a month. And someone described it around you mentioned the generalist versus specialist comparison. When you don't provide the context or don't use a GPT or whatever it is in your prompt to guide the AI, it's like walking into a room and turning on a light and trying to find a book. Whereas when you walk into a dark room and you've got a flashlight and you point that at a particular book, that's what it's like using a really robust prompt or a custom GPT, for example, to guide your work. Well, awesome. Hey, well, Joe, really thank you for coming on the podcast. I've got a quick fire round of 5 questions that I'd love to throw your way if you're up for it.
Yeah, cool. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini?
Am I allowed to say it depends?
What's your gut tell you?
Claude.
Claude, perfect. Most overhyped AI trend right now.
Too many people are saying stick a comment on this post and I'll give you the solution for free that'll earn you $15,000 a week.
Painful. Would you uh,
Yep.
would would you rather be building and selling into Europe or the USA, taking into account their regulatory environment?
Oh, USA is a wild west, isn't it? USA.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to pick Europe, perhaps. What about one New Zealand company that's quietly doing really strong or great AI work that most people won't know about?
I'll give you two. Raygun in Wellington are working on something cool, which is going to hit the market pretty soon. And Curiosity down here in Wanaka, Nadia, who's a friend of mine, she's a very smart cookie and she's doing some fun stuff with AI solutions.
Awesome, awesome. Second time we've had the shout out to the guys in Wellington and two, which is cool. And then
Nice.
your number one recommendation for people getting started in AI. I know you gave one earlier, but anything else that comes to mind?
Um, Build a prompt engineer. Build an agent that's a specialist at writing prompts or writing system instructions or both, and that then unlocks everything else.
Wicked, awesome. And where can people find your work or follow along to see your journey?
LinkedIn is where I'll be most active. really. My name's Joe Sutheran, and everyone misspells my surname. You'll find me eventually. It's not Sutherland. There's no L. There's no D. But yeah, LinkedIn is that's where I'm hanging out.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on to the podcast, and thank you to the listeners for tuning in to the AI Corner. Subscribe to the channel for weekly episodes and to hear more from the people building New Zealand's AI future. Until next time, have a good weekend.